today I'm delighted to say that I'm in conversation with Jennifer Swanson, author of Footprints Across the Planet. Now, Jennifer is an award-winning author of over 45 plus non-fiction books for children, mostly about science and technology, and Jennifer's love of STEM. And it began when she was about 7, a science club in her garage. Well, as you can see, she's no longer inside her garage. She's out inspiring children around the globe with all her wonderful books. And today we're going to talk about her latest book, which I just think is a super one, called Footprints Across the Planet. And it's her latest award-winning book, and I'm delighted to be talking with her today. So thanks for joining me today, Jennifer.
Well, thanks for having me, Sue. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, listen, let's start. Tell us about your journey. How did it all actually begin that led up to all these wonderful books?
Well, believe it or not, it did start back when I was 7, and I made a science club in my garage. For those of us that are of that age, remember the old wooden milk crates, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes, that was my mom gave us a piece of carpet and we had the milk crates set up, and me and my neighborhood kids, which you could run around back then, we used to go and study apples in the apple tree and plants. And my mom gave me the most amazing gift. She bought me a microscope.
Wow.
Right, I still have it. It's in its little box. And I love exploring things, and I took that love of science throughout my life. I went to the United States Naval Academy and got a degree in chemistry, which was really cool, and I learned a lot of engineering there. And then so I did my 5 years in the Navy, and then I was a stay-at-home mom for about 10 years because we had 3 kids. Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, what am I going to do? And I had always been a writer. And so one day my husband was like, why don't you start writing? Like, you've been talking about it for a really, really long time. And I said, okay. So, and then I discovered I could write about science, and it all kind of clicked, right? Like my love of science, my excitement to share it with kids. And now I get to write books. So this is like the dream job, and I'm not exactly sure how I got into it, but I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, it's amazing. Isn't that wonderful? I think it's very inspiring for kids to hear that an interest and a passion when you're very young,
Right.
and then someone gives you something, such a simple thing, but maybe a microscope or something, it can really spark off a huge career, really, and a wonderful change in your direction of life. So how wonderful now that you can come back round and write your books around all these different subjects and make them accessible and inspire other kids around the world too. And, you know, particularly as a woman as well, let's be honest, it's wonderful to see what you've just said and how you're hopefully influencing your own family and perhaps other children as well, and parents around the world.
Right.
So listen,
Exactly.
you've written so many wonderful books. What really inspires you then with them? Where do you get your idea? Well, I think I'm going to write about this thing this time.
I am still in my head, sort of like that 9-year-old kid with the wide-eyed curiosity. And so I want to know how things work, and that intrigues me. So I watch videos and you know, I keep current with science tech. And let me just tell you, my list is miles long of everything I want to write about. But I think I love the science and the technology, the engineering type stuff is what makes me really exciting. So it's basically anything that kind of grabs me or intrigues me. For example, when the self-driving cars kind of came onto the scene a few years ago, I was like, oh, I want to write a book about a self-driving car.
Yeah.
But we all know that you have to find the hook. Right? You can't just be like, I want to write a book about it. Like, you have to get the publishers to buy it. So I had to figure out how to kind of turn that science upside down on its head and make it exciting. And so I wrote a book called Save the Crash-test Dummies. Right? I love that it makes people, but it's about the history of car safety engineering, kind of told through the eyes of a crash test dummy and what they do. And kids love it. And that's what I do with a lot of my books, is I try to I don't try to come to science straight on, but you kind of turn it on its side
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you make it really interesting. And then people of all ages want to read it.
Yeah, because it's compelling. It's not that
Yes.
stuff that perhaps we were sort of sitting in classes when we were kids in school, feeling a bit
Yes.
kind of passive about the learning. This is really active learning. And as you were speaking, actually, I have interviewed another member of my book club called Beverly Clark. She's written about smart cars.
Oh,
And she's
there you
got
go.
she's got some lovely books called Ava Chip books, all about technology. I'll have to hook you up with her.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
you know, again, it's about making these things accessible, interesting, compelling. So it doesn't feel like you're having to study it. You're actually curious to learn more, which is brilliant.
Exactly. Exactly.
So listen, Footprints Across the Planet. Start to tell us a bit about that.
So I wrote that book. First of all, I like to say this is the book I didn't know I could write.
Right. What do you mean?
Well, because if you look at all of the books I've written, most of them are 10,000 words, 15,000, 30,000. This book has 150 words in it.
Yeah.
And it was at a time, you know, I wrote it a few years ago, kind of a little before the pandemic, but kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were having all the marches here in the United States about science and, you know, all of these other big issues. And of course, climate change is a really big issue.
Absolutely.
But I was like, I need something positive for kids.
Yes.
Like, there's got to be a way that we can not feel bad, but still want to do something about it.
Yeah.
And this book, like, I thought, and I like to pick something that kids understand. And I was like, a footprint. Like, everybody understands every single organism on this planet takes a footstep.
Mm.
And I was like, and it makes an imprint, like in the sand, in the mud, in the ground.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, this is where you start.
Yeah.
And the funny story is this book literally wrote itself while I was on a bike ride. Because sometimes we authors, we get stuck, right? We're like, we know we have a concept, we can't figure out how to get to it. And so they say, get up, walk away, go take a shower, ride your bike, you know, go for a run. And I was riding a bike and all of a sudden the words started coming to me. And so luckily I had my cell phone with me. So I started texting it to myself, right? So if you were watching me, you'd be like, what is wrong with this woman, man? She rides her bike, she stops, she texts. She rides her bike, she stops, she texts. It was like, you know, either ride your bike or text. But by the time I got home, it was about 6 miles, almost the entire book was written. So it just like, and then of course you have to edit it and whatever, but the core of the idea was there.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It was just, and it came out just kind of like this.
But you see, isn't that wonderful? Often the simplest ways as well. And it's when you're unconscious is sort of not trying too hard. I often get it when I was walking, you know, when I walk my dogs, I get inspired. And I used to have before my phone, I used to have a little notelet thing in my pocket because you're walking along relaxed and suddenly you get these really good ideas. So it's really wonderful. I mean, it's such a lovely book. I mean, I can see it in the background there as well. You haven't got one to lift up, can you?
I do. I have one right here.
You do. Look.
There you
go.
At
that. I mean, it's visually fantastic. Do you want to show us a couple? Show us just another page or two.
Well, and that's the thing. So Ray Craft made the most gorgeous photos to go with my words.
Yes.
You can see that. Yeah.
Gorgeous.
They're just vivid and beautiful. Like this one of all the different shoes that people have. And I do that with kids. I'll say, okay, let's do an extra. Show me your shoes, because everybody's shoes are different. And then you talk about how their shoes are different, but they're all in the classroom, and you know, they're all unique, but yet they're, you know, kind of a group together in the classroom. And you can do so many amazing type activities with kids about that.
I mean, the interesting thing about it, isn't it, is that it's an easy sort of conversation to have like that and fun, but there's a strong message behind it. What's the message you want the kids to get from it? And the parents too.
So the tagline when I sign it is make an impact.
Love it.
So what I want people of all ages to understand is that they are making an impact every day by taking a footstep. all they have to do is ensure that they're taking it in the right direction.
Yes.
And then that will change everything. It's a very simple, when you get down to it, like you said, it's very simple, but it's broad, but it's also positive. So if you aren't that person who wants to go, march for science or do all these active things, that's okay.
Yeah.
Just take your steps, but maybe take them in the right way. Maybe just try to recycle, or go to visit a zoo and donate money or donate your time. Like, just little tiny things are perfect. Everybody doesn't have to be,
a campaigner.
Right. I mean, like Greta Thunberg, who's amazing, but everybody doesn't have to be her. Right?
No, because everyone can play their part. That's why I like it.
Yes.
And the book is really, I mean, what's the age range for? But you can use it with very young children too, can't you? Tell us who you really sort of wrote the age range for.
Well, it's funny because my passion is actually for writing for older kids.
Right.
But this book can be used. People are using it as young as 2, 3, 4-year-olds.
Yes, because the pictures are so good.
Well, and one of my daughter-in-law's mom gives this book as a baby gift for baby showers.
Right.
Oh, wow. So, and I was like, oh, but I was like, I guess you're not too young to talk about the impact. But it's also for adults. Why not?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. There's a lot of layers to these pages. Like the one page I show you where it says footprints are difficult to spot. Those are all images of endangered animals.
Yes. Which starts these wonderful conversations with young people or children around all of that. And of course, it can be used, can't it? Of course, in schools. I mean, schools
absolutely.
Must be using
yes, we have a teacher guide, a free teacher guide on my website.
Yeah.
And there's lots of ways to use it, but teachers are also so creative. The library where I'm here, the public library, for the summer, one of the librarians created an entire summer program around this book for, I think, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. Right?
Yeah.
So
its ripple effect is really wonderful. It can trickle on down through the generations, really, too.
Absolutely.
So that's that book, and that is a wonderful book. But you've got loads of other books. I mean, where do you start? Which sort of one is your favorite one, or one that you thought has a good
kids
message?
Ask me that all the time. It's so hard. It's like your kids, right? Picking amongst your kids. Yeah. I usually give my top 3. So, one of my favorites is Astronaut-Aquanaut.
Right.
How space science and sea science interact. I did that book for National Geographic Kids, and it compares and contrasts going up in space and down in the ocean, which is so in the news these days, right? Yeah. Let's see. One of my other favorite ones is I actually did my very first trade book is Brain Games.
Yes.
Which was based on the National Geographic TV show. They actually asked me to turn that TV show into a book. And this book is all about neuroscience and how your brain works, but it has tons of activities. And the crazy thing that I've learned is I meet so many neurologists who use this and give this to their patients.
Gosh, really?
Yeah, for them to understand how their brain works and to do the activities and all this. I mean, I was floored when I was first told that. They're like, oh yeah, we all know that book. We give it to our 70, 60, 70-year-old patients. I was like, oh my gosh.
Who knew?
Right? That's what I mean. Kids' books are not just for kids.
No, they're not as well. I mean, you've written about dolphins, haven't you, as well?
Yes. Oh, yeah. That was so fun. So that was another National Geographic Kids book. They paired me up with a dolphin scientist. So I love working with scientists and engineers to write books. And we learned all about dolphins and whales, which are in the same family.
Yeah.
So that one was amazing. I mean, I don't think there's any book that I wrote that I don't like, and I didn't learn tons of information.
Yeah, well, that's the wonderful thing. But the one that struck me, because kids love to talk about poop, don't they? So you've got that poop book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, kids, the Building with Poop book. Oh my gosh. So when you are a nonfiction author, sometimes the ideas are your own, and sometimes the publishers come to you, like with Brain Games. So this was a book that the publisher emailed me. So I literally got an email from my editor that said, would you like to write a book about building with poop? I was like, Yes.
Of course.
Yes. So it's a book about engineering.
Yes.
And it's about how people in certain parts of the world who don't have a lot of building supplies have to use what they have. And it's cow dung. So it's mostly cow dung. But poop is an amazing kind of building material because you can use it sort of as a glue, but then it hardens, right? It's waterproof, and it holds up in the heat and, the cold. But I've had kids say, does it smell?
Yeah.
And I have not experienced it myself, but I asked some people and they were like, yeah, it does, but you kind of get used to it, right? Like you mix it with mud or something else. But
it works. This is not advocating going out in the garden and off you go.
No,
this is a really sort of talk and teach book, but using, like you've said, you come in at an angle that captivates a kid's imagination, and then you give them the science, which is fantastic, isn't it?
And then they can understand how other people live around the world.
Yes.
Right? And so they can kind of understand that and get a peek inside their lives and understand how that works, which is also really important, right? So we're not just looking through our own perspective.
No, absolutely. Now, I know you've got a lot of resources. So where can people find all of these wonderful things? Yes, your books, but all of your stuff, which is just so compelling and so interesting.
So my main place is my website, which is jenniferswansonbooks.com. But from there, I have a science podcast for kids called Solve It for Kids. We have 150 episodes, and we've interviewed like aquanauts, astronauts, NASA engineers,
Love it,
scientists who study giraffes and so forth. That's solveitforkids.com, but you can find all this on my original website. I have a blog that I run for science free activities for parents, homeschoolers, teachers. I do a lot of different things. Like pretty much all of the activities and teacher guides, they're all free on my website.
Yeah, it's just a wealth of wonderful, if I can just say,
yes,
because it's so accessible and just so, your enthusiasm just shines through. And, this book is a wonderful book, but do go and explore all of your wonderful books. And I'm so pleased that you're in the Sue Atkins Book Club, and we'll put up links to all these things that we've talked about. So listen, I'm just so grateful for your time. And I know you had a wonderful week. You were hanging out with the NASA guys. So thank you for finding the time to talk to me today.
Oh, absolutely. It was so great to meet you, Sue. Thank you for having me.